Welcome back. It's time for our third panel discussion all around our event's title, Learning and Development. What does it mean to the public sector? How is technology and e-learning supporting its progress? And what does learning and development look like, both at a central and local government level? As a titular panel for today's event, the next discussion will, I hope, encapsulate the absolute core of everything our guests have spoken about so far. Because without understanding what learning and development looks like in the public sector, how can we embed all the other amazing learning and innovation opportunities we've heard about? From a local authority level right up through to central government at the UK civil service, understanding how we best train our workforce is key to achieving our objectives. As part of that, we'll also cover the ways we can deliver training, the opportunities around e-learning and similar technologies, particularly in the last 12 months, to ensure that our public sector organisations can deliver learning resources which make a difference to our workforce now and, of course, in the future. So I'd like to welcome our panellists to our virtual stage today. They are James Biddlestone, Head of People and Transformation at Mansfield District Council, Lesley Heyworth, Head of Learning, Accreditation and Apprenticeships, Cross-Government Operational Delivery Profession at the UK Civil Service, Grainne Siggins, Executive Director of People Directorate at Bracknell Forest Council, and Karen Smith, Director of Adult Services at Blackpool Council. As you can see, there's a real wealth of hands-on knowledge on the panel. So if you do have any questions you'd like to ask our guests, please do take advantage of our live Q&A functionality. You'll find it on the right-hand side of your screen, and I'll keep an eye on it once we get our debate going. So welcome to all of our guests. Lesley, let's start with you, if I may. Your profession's members are very much the public face of the civil service. So people working at job centres and passport offices and borders, to name a few. What kind of support do you provide to government departments? Okie doke. Well, in that case, we've lost Lesley for now, but we'll return to Lesley and we'll go to James. James, would you just set the scene for us by telling us a bit about life at Mansfield District Council and your role as Head of People and Transformation?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for that. And hello to everybody. It's great to be here with you today. So within my role, I head up predominantly our corporate services, so leading on HR, leading and development, ICT, marketing and communications, business transformation unit, and customer services. But using L&D as a key focus at the moment for us as we work through the response and come out the other side of the responses and recovery to COVID. Just to set a bit of context for you about Mansfield and where we are in regards to our leadership and development journey and programme. A bit of a timeline if I can. So back in 2018, the council introduced an identified leadership competency framework. In the same year, there were some structural changes in the organisation where our Director of Housing and Community moved into the role of Chief Executive. So there's a change there within our makeup of the organisation. And throughout the following year in 19, we moved to have a new structured senior leadership team and provided existing opportunities for internal staff to develop and progress into those roles as part of the corporate leadership team. And introduces some new faces, which I was one of those actually in the latter part of 2019. Great time to join, and then soon thereafter we're in the grips of a global pandemic, but the challenges we face. So there was new faces. One of the interesting things we did around the leadership and development, though, as part of the recruitment process, for the first time for corporate leadership team, we introduced through the recruitment process level 1 competency testing. So looking, instead of just focusing on skills, knowledge and experience, we shifted to look at behaviours, and the behaviours we wanted to stimulate the culture within the organisation as part of the corporate leadership team. And our CEO was really energised and keen to pursue our leadership style to look at characteristics of a 21st century public sector leader. And using that to, in conjunction with that, we also did a cultural survey back then at that time and identified that a constructive style of leadership would generate an optimum level of success and culture for us. So but in terms of developing our framework, led by my talent and skills team, but in support with Solace, we developed and started the foundation of a leadership structure, which enabled us to grow as strategic leaders. And we've been using, obviously, that platform and the experiences that we've shared and our behaviours to steer our culture on learning and development. So that's a bit of a whistle-stop tour of where we are on our framework at the moment.
Let's have a whistle-stop tour of Bracknell Forest as well with Grainne. I mean, what sort of challenges has urgency placed on leadership roles within the council where you are?
Really interesting to discuss this, because from my perspective, it's been an incredibly challenging time for people in local government and with our health partners. And the officers have been incredibly resilient in terms of their approach, more or less overnight, having to completely change their ways of working, council's emergency systems suddenly coming into response as we all started to work online, with the exception of our essential frontline workers, of course. And that required a very different input. And in Bracknell Forest, whilst I wasn't there at the time, I was in Southampton, but just seeing the changes that they're able to make as senior leaders, and being able to ensure that those systems were working effectively, that the people were very quickly trained with these tools, that whilst they knew about them and were using them, having to use them at a whole different level, thinking about how peer support and supervision was provided online and on Teams calls, and just being able to respond really quickly as well to local government direction and information all of the time. I think in addition to that, there's something about system leadership. Sorry, there was a noise there. There was something about system leadership and our ability to work effectively and step up those partnership working with our key partners in health, the police, education, and develop very swift responses to a whole range of issues. But during that time, we've been able to ensure that communication with staff has been really effective, and ongoing communication and support. And I would say one thing that we can't forget going forward is the impact of the last 15 months on our staff. Whilst we might deal with the functional elements of returning to the office and back to what our new ways of working are going to be, I do think there is something for us as senior leaders to reflect on the emotional journey that our staff have actually gone through, because there is something about that in actually rebuilding the resilience, because the pace of work isn't going away, it's going to increase. We've got significant level of catch up on some of our corporate plans across the board, which we're all embracing. So I do think it's time just to reflect, and whilst thinking about the learning and development element of how we need to support our staff with those skills for the future, there's something about supporting people with their mental health and well-being and that emotional resilience going forward. So, I mean, that would be a key message that I would share with people, that people do not forget that part, and give people, providing opportunities for staff to share and explore what that means individually for them.
Now, hopefully we've become a bit more of an empathetic society through this hybrid working too. Karen, I'd love to hear, you're Director of Adult Services for Blackpool Council. Right at the beginning when Grainne was talking, you were nodding all the way through it. So I suspect that you're probably experiencing a lot of the same kinds of things at Blackpool. But will you do the same kind of thing? Give us a sense of what's been happening there and how you've been coping with everything.
Yes, absolutely. And I acknowledge everything that Grainne said, all really important. One of the things from a leadership and a learning development aspect that we did before the pandemic is we equipped our emergency response teams with training and support around resilience and dealing with trauma and coming through the other side, only to find that during the pandemic pretty much everybody that's been involved right at the heart of the working has been through those similar experiences. So expanding that and acknowledging it and recognising it through the whole workforce is key. In Blackpool, we're a small unitary. I've been there since 2001, latterly as the Director of Adult Social Services. We work very closely as a corporate team, and like pretty much every other area, as soon as the pandemic hit, we also were formed into our LRF. So a number of us as leaders were carrying out our substantive roles within our own organisation. We were doing the partnership work that was already underway, so for us with our NHS colleagues and our children's services, and then step into the world of the emergency response in the local resilience forum alongside our county council, our district councils and the other unitary, working with the army and the police. So from a change of style point of view, that really threw us into rapid development of the kind of approaches that we've been using before. Throughout, I think it's been, we always have to find positives, don't we, in situations. It's been the most amazing learning journey. Things that would have taken us months and years to do, we've done really, really quickly together. Who knew that we could make decisions at the speed that we could? But our leaders and managers and staff have been really challenged to find practical solutions to real-time problems, day in, day out, without much respite. And then the roller coaster of waves of pandemic, I think I can remember 2 individual weeks where it felt like things had just eased off a bit in the whole time since last March. So our team working and our support for each other really, really came into its own. And like everybody else, we've had to find new ways of supporting people's structured learning and development. We already had our online training materials, but they really came into their own and we developed further. Our IT department have been telling us for years, or introducing us for years into things like Teams and etc., that we suddenly, within the space of a couple of weeks, had to become proficient in, having battered them off for a while, some of us. And we also, in some of our practical learning and development, we had to substitute actual real service delivery for what would have been training away from the direct role. So there've been loads of opportunities for us in what has been an extremely difficult and pressured time for everyone. And for us as a social services department, we work closely with colleagues across the rest of the council, playing our part in relation to that.
Gosh, it sounds like you've been on your own very much learning and development roller coaster as well there, Karen. Well done to all of you for keeping it going in such strange, unprecedented times. James, turning to you, when did you recognise the need for formal leadership development programme within Mansfield District Council, and why did you take that approach?
Yeah, no, thanks, Alex. Yeah, so I suppose in terms of the drivers behind that were around the new structural leadership in the organisation. So when we spoke about the newly developed CLT team, we thought that would a means of a catalyst to support that would be a developed leadership competency framework that we developed. Why did we take the approach? There were a couple of things in terms of what was happening with the organisation at that time. So back at the stage in which we developed and implemented, we saw a new political shift in terms of the administration within the council with a new executive mayor. So we really felt it was important from a leadership and development perspective that we demonstrated the leadership team was strong and resilient as a corporate leadership team and wider leadership colleagues, that we were resilient. And boy has that been challenged, as other colleagues have said, in response to the COVID pandemic. We wanted to use the skills that we'd learned from the development framework to look at ensuring we're delivering collaborative working and that we were a high-performing team. We used facilitated support sessions actually with Solace. So we had sessions called like Safe Space, where we'd share and share challenges as teams. We'd approach and look at understand what was needed to help one another and look at our strengths and limitations. But we also developed through that the confidence as a team or wider teams within the organisation to speak openly and seek the views of others. At times, if I'm honest, it was somewhat like therapy, which we all greatly appreciated. But fundamentally, it was about using the framework that we had to develop and create a leadership culture, starting from CLT all the way through the organisation.
And Grainne, same sort of question for you. I mean, how are you developing that leadership culture, and what approaches are you taking to develop future leadership skills across the council where you are?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. And recently, as part of the development of our corporate plan and approaches going forward, it's just us being really clear about our workforce and organisational development strategy that has been launched. So as part of that, we're currently undertaking a full skills audit, which includes some of the more detail around the modern use of technology as part of day-to-day work, probably at a depth we've never done before, as well as thinking about what does leadership actually mean. So there is something about us being clear about what skills those leaders need to have, because as Karen will know, in adult social care and a lot of the people-related services, we have technical experts, and often those technical experts are just expected to step up into management positions where they have to deal with complex HR issues, change management issues, financial management, business insights and things of that nature. So just understanding how we develop those into those roles, not only as people managers, but people who have to effectively manage their business. So our new workforce and organisational development plan is looking at how we do that, including some of the elements that James talked about in terms of understanding values, behaviours, and what it means to be a compassionate leader. And being clear about what that development then means for our staff. In terms of types of roles, especially when we're talking about partnership and collaboration, often social care or council services, when they're working with partners, they're having to work on their own. You're really confident and clear about their positions, often with a myriad of our health colleagues, so that those voices can often not be heard very strongly. So being able to support people to develop skills to be able to operate effectively in those multi-agency environments, especially often when we're looking at pooling shared resources in some form to get positive outcomes for our residents. So it is actually thinking about that environment of more partnership working around designing services around the people we support and the residents we support and what challenges that means for us, because it's not just about training. It is about different ways of working and different types of learning. You know, equipping our leaders and our, frontline managers and staff with those opportunities to get exposure to some of those things, and really thinking how we buddy up and mentor and coach some of those people coming through. You probably argue slightly easier in a smaller authority like Bracknell Forest, but having a very personal approach and interest in people's development to support them to stay. Because what we do know going forward with a very different way of working, that people are going to be more mobile. So recruitment and retention, where some of those roles you don't need to be, based in the borough for very long, probably 1 day a week where people can travel. So ultimately that new way of working will actually create a more mobile workforce. So what is our offer? It's not just about money, it is about that support that we provide as leaders and how valued we make those staff feel as part of the organisation, and they're not alone, just sort of investing in them as people so that they feel that the council really values them.
I think, Karen, investing in people is really, really key. And I'm just wondering how you develop people in Blackpool, and how you make sure, like Grainne said, that people's voices are heard and that people can learn and develop and grow in our different times that we're experiencing now.
And I think it's really important that kind of sense of being able to speak frankly and openly, to be able to disagree without falling out, to be able to put forward with clarity a position that may be quite alien in terms of its language or and its concepts and its approach, and really get that contribution into those partnership discussions is absolutely key for us. One of the things we've done locally is really harness the benefits of the apprenticeship scheme at all levels, so from frontline posts all the way up to our leadership posts. We have apprenticeships in place. I think we're probably one of the first to have some completers on the social work apprenticeship programme, which we're really delighted about. We partnered with our local university on that. We managed to keep the learning and the practice going through the pandemic, which was no mean feat for everybody, concerned, but we were really creative in terms of how we managed to support that and to deliver it. And the advantage of having our managers going through that and our leaders going through that, it helps with career progression from a grow your own with some supported learning. And like Grainne suggested, there've been many occasions in the past where people have been promoted but haven't been provided or supported with those skills that they need in order to be effective leaders, and we've kind of left them to it and concentrated on the frontline staff, and to our detriment, and over the last few years we've been able to move forward with much more of a very clear leadership and development programme that includes structured learning, but also the mentorship, the support. Colleagues need to be able to be frank and open with each other to have the kind of support that was talked about earlier. If we're going to learn and grow, we're going to make mistakes. There's no question about it. We are in unprecedented times. First time I've used that word in a half an hour, so that it must be getting more normal now. But we have really harnessed that social work programme in terms of giving people that structure, that approach, that oversight, and we've found that to be really effective. And we've got 14 people going through the social work apprenticeship. We've got leaders, we've got business administrators, we've got departmental managers, all travelling through that programme. And I think there's also an advantage of if the learning for leaders is similar in structure to the learning for frontline staff. Again, there's more appreciation of the need for time out from work to concentrate, to develop, to do the assignments, etc. So that's really worked well for us, and we've been delighted by it.
It'd be interesting probably to learn. I did say earlier, so for those who were in our earlier morning sessions, they'll have heard me say we have 3 apprentices running our event today, which is fantastic. And particularly as we move into more of a digital space, and we all have to, I groan a bit because it's not my natural sort of setting, the digital space, when I'm moaning away behind the scenes about I can't navigate myself on this platform, and how do I do it? You realize the value of particularly having young people who are very technically savvy. Just wondering, James, how have you found the sort of need to digitally transform much quicker, the urgency that we've had to do it? We were all online to do it, weren't we? It was always a plan to be digitally much more savvy, but the pandemic has definitely accelerated it. How have you coped with that in the council, and has that been quite a roller coaster journey for you?
Yeah, most definitely, and I can't tell Paul, because in the sense it has been challenging. Like you say, it was just exponential in terms of the drive and need to push our digital activities. So even in the sense of our officers and the skills required to set up home working environments. Obviously, some of us take it for granted, don't they? Plugging into the network cables and all the rest of it. So there was challenges like that the ICT team had to support with. But also ensure that we had the right literature and tools to support the team. So colleagues have spoken about e-learning modules. We quickly adapted e-learning modules. We developed hopefully simplistic user guides and those sort of products for the team to use. We'd have structured drop-in sessions to support with learning around digital use of equipment and skills. But also looking not only internally but externally, we've been really conscious from our digital skills and growth agenda around supporting communities to become more digitally enabled, not just as service users, but actually members of our community that are going to be challenged economically through the outcome of the pandemic. So our skills agenda on digital doesn't just look internally focused, it's also externally focused and supporting our communities to become more digitally enabled. So we've had a bit of it's getting that balance right and doing it in the right way to support our own internal needs, but those of our communities. So yeah, we've tried all the tools that were available to us. We've definitely learned through the process, as we've said. It wasn't smooth, but yeah, I think we're coming out the other side far better for it in terms of the skill set within the organisation.
I think it's very important, Grainne, isn't it, that, as James just touched on there, that people don't feel left out, and whether that's because they might be elderly and not as not as computer savvy, or whether people don't have the budget perhaps to have a computer or a laptop at home. How do you make sure that as you sort of transform as a council, it's all encompassing and everybody still feels part of it? Because people are very much at the heart of this, aren't they?
Definitely, and as James says, it is about both the staff and our residents. And I think what we have seen over the past year is that step up from government investing in some of those children in the hardest to reach areas with computer equipment to support their learning, and that has been welcomed and well utilised by schools, which has been effective. But the home situations often make it difficult, especially when we've had parents, officers working at home, husbands and wives working at home, trying to teach the children at home at the same time. But there is something about the fluidity of those working days, something about returning back to normal. So I think that investment in Bracknell Forest, so again, similar to James, we've got a very well developed ICT and digital strategy, and as part of that, we've got significant coverage in terms of broadband and actual tech savvy residents. But it's something that we're always mindful of. And I think it has to be blended with that opportunity for people-based interaction, so web-based information, people-based interaction, but also facilitated and supported, because our communities have varying needs. And it's important that as local councils, we're still able to respond to the needs of all of those individuals in our community and find those opportunities for ensuring supported. From a staff perspective, I think that's probably going to be is about how do we harness where people are possible. So people have significantly developed their skills during this period, and so what I've been trying to do is about supporting people to even further about technology and what that actually means for our and different things like, and how we reach out to residents and what that technology offer might look like in the future. So whilst people are tired, people are also got used to change. And I think we need to embrace that position that people are in being hungry for change, continue that journey with the innovation, debate and discussion colleagues on the call have talked about today.
Absolutely. I'm going to take a question, if I may. Andrew Abrahams has said, do you think the government should help more with digital education in the community to make sure they aren't democratically excluded and discriminated against without access to services? And that's from Mayor Andy from Mansfield District Council. We'd like to take that one. Is that anything you would talk about?
On that. I suppose we would all argue that the government can always do more. So I'll put that general point out. It's not a position on anything. But I think it's about all being really, really clear about what our needs are for our local community. And as councils, having clear strategies to be able to reach all of our community them. And then it's about theirs and our political leaders to understand how to then utilise those resources to invest in our community. There will always be an argument for more money, and we can always make that. Unfortunately, we have an amount of money that we have. We can always lobby for money, but I think it's about what is the role of council in whatever political environment and how we utilise our resources. Within that will be our own.
You're breaking up a little bit, so I'm just going to interrupt you there. We've got time for 2 more quick questions, which I'm going to put to Karen and James, because we're just losing your microphone a little bit. Robert Lowther asks, James, is it time for a national mentoring programme for senior leadership development? What do you think?
Most definitely, there'll always be a benefit in obviously having that approach and that structure. One would suggest, however, that I think, having spoken to peers and colleagues within local government, there are those development and leadership structures in place. So obviously it is driven by the organisation themselves and their culture, but the ability to have and give support and expertise and learning to our colleagues from a structured mentoring programme can only derive benefits. So most definitely supportive of that, and I think there's already great work happening, but if there was something at a national strategic level which helps shape and give steer to that, then most definitely there's benefits to that.
Wondering if perhaps you can answer this briefly too, James, while we're on this subject. Is there a link to the characteristics of a 21st century leader that might be able to be shared? I don't know whether maybe you can sort that out privately behind the scenes, if there's one that you've used with, through part of the development you've been doing at your council.
Yeah, well, in terms of one of the tools we used around looking at behaviour and is the use of psychometric testing. So there's many products there. However, we use Thomas International to look at behaviour analysis and to, like I said, as part of the recruitment process. And then it's given us the opportunity to develop and look at coaching and intervention support off the base of the psychometric testing. And we've also used, we have a subscription to Virtual Ashbridge, which is an additional development resource which enables us to look at individual development needs. So there's many tools out there. Obviously, I've just named a few that we specifically use.
Question, which hopefully you can answer. It's coming from Martin Evans. Martin says, my experience of local services in Hampshire is that responses and progress on important planning issues, for example, has been very slow. In contrast, most private sector businesses with support services has been improved with people working from home. Do you think LAs have attempted to deal with the problems? I mean, I know you have where you are, but more generally, can you give Martin an answer on that?
Sorry, who's that directed to, Helen?
I was asking you.
Right, yeah, I absolutely think there's more that we can do together. Where we're going now is to think about as things do start to open up, what kind of shape of work and response do we want to be in the future? And I think, in common with lots of other organisations, we'll probably be aiming for a hybrid approach, a hybrid response to that. So one of the things we're getting used to now is where we're having meetings where some of the participants are virtual and some of them are face to face in the room, etc. And that obviously causes its own issues, but gives us lots of opportunities to be engaged with the people that we need to be, who may be geographically diverse from us, without people having to kind of travel up the length and breadth of either the county or the country. And I think between us and independent businesses, we've learned so much over the last year that it would be really a shame to lose some of those real advantages that we've gained from that. There'll be many things that we're happy to step back into. I think our decision making has in so many respects been much more rapid than any of us could have ever dreamed, let alone aspired to, because of necessity. And one of the conversations we're having with our independent sector partners and with our NHS colleagues is how not to lose some of that really rapid kind of assessment and decision making, and kind of pushing ahead. There's been a load of risk-based decision making, which they're nervous places to be. They're things that we would have described as leadership characteristics before. They're things that I think we as public organisations and large bureaucracies have not been as agile as we needed to be. And I think we just need to really harness and hold on to some of those advantages and remember that actually great things were possible, that would have taken months and years previously. And whilst some things will need to slow down and have more structure to them, let's not lose the advantages that we got, and the ability to work really closely together with our businesses and our public agencies.
I think that's a really nice place to leave it, Karen. And I'm just smiling as we talk about hybrid working. We've got the next door neighbour's child making a real racket on the balcony that side. And on the balcony this side, our windows get cleaned in our building about once a year or something like that. And I can see a window cleaner clanking around on the balcony. So we are all adapting, aren't we? We haven't seen the window cleaner in this panel. But Grainne, I'm sorry I didn't come back to you, but your microphone right at the end was going in and out. And we are out of time. So I'd like to thank James and Grainne and Karen. A shame we didn't have Lesley, but you managed to cover a lot of the challenges and potential solutions, which I'm sure many of you in our audience have had or are currently experiencing. And thank you to you for seizing the opportunity to get involved It really is great for me to have your input, and it helps me make this a real conversation. So if you're with us for this afternoon sessions, then do keep those questions coming. For those just joining us, all the content from today will be available to you on demand, including my comments about the window cleaner, on the platform within 24 to 48 hours after we finish. So right now, we're going to hear from our next keynote speaker, and I'm delighted to introduce you to Lesley, Chair of the Board of Peabody Trust. And yes, over to you, Bob.